Hi, welcome to Real Revit, Revit for the real world. I'm your host, Tom Dorner. Let's get started with this Revit basics lesson. For this simple example, I've got two grids that intersect, and I want to place columns at the grid intersection. There are two types of columns in the Revit world. There are structural columns and there are architectural columns. If you are on the architectural tab and use that little pull down, you'll get to see both of them. If you go to the structural tab, there is also a column command. This one is dedicated to structural columns only. So I'm going to place a structural column at that grid intersection. By default, structural columns are set to the depth. Structural engineers look at the world a little bit differently than architects from the level above and the floor system and the columns that support the floor system above. If I'm an architect, I'm going to set this to height because that's the way I typically view the world. And just like walls and most other elements inside of Revit, I can choose whether they're unconnected in height or whether they're connected to the level above, which is what I just told this column to do. Next, I'm going to place a wall along grid line A here, and I'm going to let it run through that structural column. The first thing to notice is that the wall will run through that column, not break itself, and coexist with the structural column. In Revit, this is by design. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to choose to place an architectural column. Architectural columns can be in various shapes and sizes. I'm just going to choose the default 18-inch by 18-inch size. And when I place that, something magical happens. Suddenly the wall, even though you can see the logic of it still is complete through the column, is no longer intersecting the column. Instead, the layers of the wall that are designated to wrap have moved around that architectural column shape. And I can make those architectural columns various sizes. So I created a smaller 14-inch by 14-inch one here, and I can change that. And you can see that the wrapping elements adjusted automatically as well. If I check on the properties of the wall, go to the structure, we can see that the both finished layers have the wrap box checked. And that's what enables them to flow around that architectural column shape, which I prefer to think of those as a wrapping element rather than a traditional column. So going back to the model, if I create another wall along grid 1 and move it through there, it too wraps around that shape. Now, is it truly furred out? No, it violates the first rule of Revit, which is model it like you build it. But at least in the early stages, you can use this, and I'll argue that it's a very little actual BIM value to model little furring walls that go around that column. That's a lot of work. I've done that in the past and gotten very little benefit in return from it. So the other thing that architectural columns have that structural columns don't is that they are room bounding. So if I go and create another wall, I'm touching on this wall and I'm using the shortcut CS, which is create similar. I'm going to throw a couple of extra walls in here. I'm going to throw a room in with the shortcut RM. And we can see here I've got the fill enabled that it is truly bounding that room. And there's no law that says that these architectural columns have to be centered on the grid. You can play with them and you can move them so that they're not. That wouldn't work in real life, but let's say I wanted to tighten up the furring on the left side of that. I can move that like that, and the room bounding property of the architectural column changes the room bounding like it should. So in summary, architectural columns are really wrapping elements that are designed to take layers of the wall and move them around the structural element shape. So I hope this helps. Look for a future video of mine that will explain alternate uses for architectural columns as well. I hope you found this video useful and interesting. If you did, please click on the like button and I'd appreciate it if you would subscribe to my channel, and if you want to click on the bell button for future notifications of uploads, that would be wonderful as well.